Welcome to the Plant-Based Podcast. Did you know that plants are truly amazing? Not only can you grow them and eat them, you can also wear them, drink them, nourish your skin with them, and so much more. Let Ellen and Michael inspire you to love plants as much as they do, as they chat with the movers and shakers in this wonderful plant-based world. So, let's dig in.
Introducing a LAVA-LITE No Gnats, the red one. Get rid of your fungus gnat infestation with No Gnats. No Gnats offers a simple 100% natural solution to the eradication of these annoying flies on your houseplants and office plants. It creates a barrier between the soil and the air. No Gnats inhibits the ability to lay eggs in the soil and for the fungus gnat larvae to escape, for total fungus gnat control. Look out for it online and in your local gardening stores. Find out more at lava-lite.co.uk. So with pollinators in the spotlight, especially the bees, we wanted to find out more about the plight of our garden bees. In fact, our first ever podcast episode was all about bees at Cambridge Botanic Garden. And now the Save the Bees campaign has been going for a few years and gardeners have been planting with bees, especially bees in mind. There's been a rise in beekeeping, and today's guest, Annie Webb from Annie's Beekeeping, is here to tell us what the impact of that has been, what we should all be doing to help all types of pollinators, and so much more, including her wild day today. So welcome to the podcast, Annie.
Hey guys, you all right?
We're good, thank you.
Yeah, really good. We heard you had a bit of a wild morning already, but not necessarily involving bees, right? Some other pollinators.
I've not out with any bees this morning. I had a wasp nest in the ground that I nearly streamed through. So I had to deal with that, which was that was exciting. No bee suits either, so yeah, a bit risky. And then I had to deal with a baby hedgehog. So off to the local rescue centre, who are now dealing with it. Because I don't deal with hedgehogs.
But you've done the right thing, rescue centre will look after the hedgehog.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely.
Did you get stung by wasps?
No, luckily not today. Not today.
Do you know what? I had a wasp nest underneath my rose bush once, and I was like pruning, and I just put my hand literally in it. I got stung all up my hand, all up my arms, and they literally me in my back door. I ran, I literally ran because they just went wild.
Oh, bless you!
Back door, and they were all coming behind me. I was like,
did you shriek? Yeah.
I don't think I shrieked as much as I swore, more than shrieking.
I've had it once. I've had them attack me at the back of the head before. Gardening, they've all come at me at the back of the head. I didn't know there was a boom.
Anyway.
So Annie, I believe you've done presenting, you've done lots of different stuff around different clubs, but you haven't done a podcast before. First time today, right?
I've never done a podcast before. Yeah, this is a first one.
Yeah.
I've done lots of different things, but yeah, this is definitely a first.
Yeah, well, tell us about you then. Tell us about your background and kind of what you're up to now, really. Kind of give us a bit of a potted history, please.
It's an interesting one, really. So I am, as well as a beekeeper, I'm also a gardener, RHS trained. I kind of went down this route after losing my father and struggling with my mental health. I was kind of feeling called back to nature after spending a lot of time gardening with them as a child. So I wanted to do beekeeping when my father was alive. It was something we were going to look at doing together. And after he passed away, I thought, right, I'm gonna look into this. We're gonna do it. I was struggling and I needed something to kind of give me new light. So that was what I went in. I found a course down in Herefordshire. At the time I was living in Birmingham, working in a garden centre. So I'd sneak off on the weekends. I'd get my friends to cover my shifts for me, sneak off and go and do my beekeeping training. And I absolutely loved it. As soon as I opened up that first hive and I felt what it was about, it's very calming. there's a real energy about it. So it was something I knew that was right for me, and it was something I knew I was set on doing. It was then working out how I was going to get to the next point with it. So I quit my job at the garden centre, took myself off to Pershore College, got qualified in gardening, set up a gardening business so that I could basically fund my beekeeping. And we're a few years down the line now, and I've got a good established gardening business and a good established beekeeping business. So yeah, it's interesting. It's a struggle juggling the two sometimes, especially this time of year when they're both a bit wild. But yeah, it's that's my background, really. Yeah.
That's
inspiring.
It is really inspiring. You know, at a time that was difficult for you, you took action and done something that you felt was sort of calling you almost. Do you know what I mean? And that's such a good thing to do. You know, you went out there and made the change, you know, and that is really inspiring. So well done, you.
Thank you.
I want to know what beekeeping actually means, right? Because I see hives of bees and people say, you know, I keep bees and da-da-da. But what does it involve? Like, what is beekeeping? I know it should sound like we should all know it means keep bees, but what does it involve?
It's the first time I've actually ever, I get asked a lot of questions. It's the first time I've ever been asked. And really, our main job is the health of the bees inside the hive. So our bees in the UK, well, honeybees across the world are quite susceptible to a lot of pests and diseases. So our main job really is going through the hives to work out what's going on, making sure there's nothing present, making sure they've got food available, and making sure there's a queen there laying eggs so the next generation of bees is coming through. And obviously, if we get excess honey, we'll take the honey as well. But that's it in a nutshell.
And can anyone do beekeeping? Anyone at home? Is it easy? Is it a good idea to start as well?
No is the answer to that.
Here we go.
So for me personally, when it was something I looked at going into, I was told by a much older beekeeper, don't rush into it, don't get into it for the honey, and make sure that you do some training, which is why I took myself off and did some training before I got any hives. There's a lot to beekeeping. It's more than anything learning all the pests and diseases that they are susceptible to, how to spot them in the hive, how to spot a healthy colony and a weak colony. There's so much to it, and we see it a lot. I do a lot of training for new beekeepers. I do a lot of mentoring and things like that. And a lot of people will just go and buy hives, and they'll find in the first year they're losing their colonies because they're not able to tell what's going on. They've taken the honey off, so there's not enough food for them left over the winter and things like that. So they're not establishing strong, healthy colonies. So we try and encourage, if it's something you want to get into, go and have a look at the British Beekeepers Association or come to a beekeeper like myself so that we can go through it and kind of show you the basics and see if it's something you really want to get into, because it's a very big commitment.
I have a question.
Okay.
And that is, you know how you said when you look in the hive to see if there's like any pests or diseases, or if the queen is doing what the queen should do, how do you even know? Like, when I look in a hive, it just looks really busy. Like, how can you tell?
So there's signs to spot for certain diseases within, so we can look at the like formation on the wax. If there's like I don't know, dimples in the brood, there might be pus looking substances coming out of the brood and things like that. When we're holding the frames up and looking at them closely, what we're looking for are eggs at the very bottom of the cells to see if the queen's been laying eggs. And we can tell by what stage the eggs are sitting at how old the eggs are, so how fresh the queen's been laying. So if we see day-old eggs, we're pretty certain that there's a queen present in the hive without having to look for her directly, basically. So it's all the sorts of things we're looking for.
And we're going to touch on other pollinators, but first of all, just explain to us bees, because the bee that we're used to seeing is kind of like a bumblebee, but there are so many more that are potentially in our gardens, isn't there? Can you give us a little bit of info on that?
Across the entire world, there's around 250,000 species of bees, so it's a lot. There's a lot of bees there. In the UK, we have several species. What we are working with are honeybees. They are not the only bees that produce honey. Bumblebees also produce honey. The difference between bumblebees and honeybees are basically when it comes down to nest building. So a bumblebee makes their nest really messy. There'll be like a little patch of brood with a bit of food and a bit more brood and a bit more food. Whereas honeybees, they build their colonies very regimented. So you'll have your brood in the middle with small food sources around the outside, and then the bigger the food sources start to go out towards the edges. So that's in the obviously where their main brood colony is, and then we can stack up honey boxes and start collecting the honey because they're not laying eggs in the center of the honey. So that's why we extract honey from honeybees rather than bumblebees or a few of the other bees that also produce honey.
Annie, we've spoken about this before. I'm vegan, so we had the conversation about whether as a vegan you eat honey or not, which is not the debate for this podcast right now. But there is one thing that freaks me out. And then you said something in like which made me really laugh, and I thought, yeah, I get that bit. Is that I saw a video of a queen bee being artificially inseminated, and I literally just thought, oh my gosh, why are we doing that?
Okay, so we're going to touch on that a little bit later, I think. That's a really interesting question. It's a subject that I'm a little bit funny about, but it is something that I am trained in. So for me personally, I did it because if we ever get to a stage where bees completely wipe out, if we have queens and we have drone semen, we can basically repopulate bees. So that is why I did it as an emergency. But yeah, I think we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah, that's fine. Like, I was just, I never get that vision out of my head. I was like, oh my God. And then you said to me, but if there was a zombie apocalypse, you'd be pleased that I know how to artificially inseminate bee. And I was like, you're right. Yeah, you're right. I would be.
So there you go.
So with the amount of, beekeeping now, is that helping the bee population overall?
It's got to a point now where we are looking at the over-farming of bees. We are trying to encourage lots of people to do it, but with fewer hives, so not having hundreds and hundreds of hives sitting in fields, because what that's doing is now starving out of the pollinators. And I think a lot of that has come from places like, well, obviously to make money first and foremost, that's the main basis of most of these businesses, is to make the money off honey. So obviously the more hives we have, the higher the production. But in places like America and Australia, where they've got vast amount of land, they are able to keep bees in the thousands and it not affect other pollinators. But because we're such an island, we're really struggling for habitat as it is, with obviously the building of houses and things like that. So the pollinators are already starting to struggle. But now what we're seeing is this massive rise in honeybees. And I mean, a honeybee colony can have anywhere between 20,000 to 60,000 bees in it over the height of summer. So that's, you've got 100 hives in a field. You do the math, that's a lot of bees in one area when you've got all of the other pollinators around kind of looking for food as well.
Yeah, that's quite understandable. Actually, this year on my allotment, I've had loads of bee swarms, like way more than usual. Like, why has there been so many this year, or is that just me and my allotment?
That's an interesting question, because it's come up a lot this year. I think there's a few things to play in that. The last 3 years previous to this year, we've had quite bad weather coming out of spring. It's been quite damp or quite cold. So we're not seeing the usual kind of swarming that we would normally see. And then I think going into this year, we had quite a damp start to the season. And then all of a sudden it went really warm, and it was consistently warm for weeks on end. So the bees just had the perfect opportunity. And because beekeepers have certain windows that they can go into the hive, it has to be warm enough and it has to be dry enough. And it was so wet building up to the start of that warm season that we weren't getting into the hive. So we were still playing catch up as they were all going off doing their business sort of a thing. So I think it just went wild. I mean, it's calmed down now. It's swarming season's come to an end, although we will still see swarms throughout the rest of the season. It won't be in the masses that we saw this spring, which was, I mean, I had 12 calls on one day just for swarms and that. Equipment, like, oh my God, you know, it's
oh my God.
It was crazy.
What should we do then? Like, if we see a bee swarm, what
so I mean, more often than not, they will move on within an hour or two. They often stop because
an hour or two. Yeah, that's a long time to wait. If they're surrounding your head.
It's around your head for an hour or two. Like,
yeah, if they were around your head, I don't think you'd be calling me. You'd be running down the road screaming.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one. So the best thing you can do really is go on the British Beekeepers Association website, depending on where you are, and that will basically you can follow the swarm page, which will point you in the right direction. You can put your postcode in and it will show up all the local beekeepers to you, and it will basically be first come, first serve. Hopefully you'll get through to the first beekeeper and they'll be available. But the fact of the matter is we don't really make money off swarm collecting. So we all have jobs and things like that. So it will be whoever can get there first. And sometimes we will rush to get there and the bees will be gone because they do move on. Usually in the evenings, if they've set somewhere and they've not found a home, that tends to be when we go and collect them more often than not, because they're obviously exposed to the elements if it's bad weather and things like that. So definitely head to the
I gotta just say, that is magical. Like, you can hear them coming. And when I was on the first one that came this year, I was standing on the allotment and I was like, what's that noise? Like, where's that coming from? And I looked around and it's kind of in the distance and you hear sort of a hum more than like, I was like, where's that coming from? And then it came and it's like more buzz because it's getting closer. And then they were just all around, like all above my head. But there was a good distance between the top of my head and where they were. And I stood under the first swarm because they were so docile. And it was like magic. But the second swarm, they didn't seem to be quite so docile. So I kind of hid in the greenhouse until they go to the top of the greenhouse.
Oh my God.
And literally minutes. It's not like, ages. And they just... Both of them settled in the hedge behind my allotment, different days, that is. And then about a week later, there was another one that was in the hedge further on down. So I had three, like in about 2 weeks, and it was beautiful.
It must be, Ellen, it must be so strange having this unidentified buzz around you. It's like being in your back. It's like being in your back bedroom.
An unidentified buzz around you.
I've been in there, yeah.
Oh my God.
Annie, it might take her a minute, but I think the penny's there. Right, I'm in there.
When the ball drops.
I've got a very serious next question, which follows on from what we talked about a few moments ago, which is pollinators. So we've talked about bees, various types of bees, but then there are other pollinators. And I know it seems obvious that there will be other pollinators, but can you just remind us what they are? Because one of those is wasps, and wasps have a really good use. So run us through some of the other pollinators and what we should do to attract them to our gardens, as well as the honeybees and other bees.
Absolutely. So we have a vast amount of pollinators in the UK. We're quite lucky, really. We've got things like butterflies, ladybirds, bats. We have some nighttime pollinators, bats and moths. They're really important, and ones we don't see often unless we catch them at dusk. It's quite interesting. They aren't necessarily their purpose isn't necessarily pollinating, but because they are flying from tree to tree, plant to plant, they're always pollinating, although it's not their main purpose, like bees really. Like I said, things like butterflies, ladybirds. I mean, there's a vast amount of insects. Any insects that travel from plant to plant that are touching the pollen are classed as pollinators, really. And there's so much that we can do to encourage them into the gardens, creating wildlife sections. I mean, it doesn't matter how big your garden is, you can create spaces for wildlife in many areas. Things like tree boxes, little piles of dead wood in the corners, things like that, leaf piles. They're all beneficial to our pollinators. And the other important thing to source is water for them, especially when we have those hot summers. They struggle to find water, and filling up bird baths with some marbles in or things like that, so they've got little pebbles to stand on, so they're able to get some water, is a really, really useful way. More so sometimes than the plants, because they really struggle for water source over the summer. So yeah, that's probably one of the most important things you can do for them. Okay.
And of course, wasps then. What do we do about wasps? Because we're always naturally scared of them, but they're really important in the garden as well, aren't they?
They are, and it's not just because they're pollinators. They're hugely beneficial because they eat our garden pests. They are carnivores, and they eat certain bugs and things like that. So we want to encourage them into the garden, and really, for the best part, if we leave them alone, they are okay. Like the wasp nest that I found this morning, I lay down in front of and filmed no problem without a bee suit on for a video for Instagram, and I didn't get stung once, because I was able to assess the situation and go in with a calm energy, not flailing my arms around and being scared. They were absolutely fine with me being there. And I think what we have to remember is, if we remain calm, like in any situation with animals, if we remain calm most of the time, it's okay. It's only when we go dive bombing into the nest with our shears or our secateurs, then we have to worry. And the best thing you can do if you are being chased by wasps is run in a straight line as fast as you can without flailing your arms around. Basically just like a pencil, run as fast as you can in a straight line. And if there's water, try and get into water. It happens for gardeners quite a lot. I hear of it quite a lot. It's something that we can't help sometimes. But for just generally in the garden, if you can remain calm, you'll be okay.
Yeah.
You hear that, Ellen? Remain calm.
Remain calm. Everybody remain calm.
She would find it hard.
No, you've got that completely wrong. I'm very calm about anything like that, because like Annie just said, if you have like the calm energy, it's like they know that, if you're going crazy, then you're just creating that mad vibe, and then they're going to feel more aggressive, aren't they? I've got to just say about other pollinators, like things like lacewings and hoverflies, that kind of thing, are so important to have in the garden. And I cut some flowers this morning, and I want them to dry, and I laid them out in my utility room with the back door open, so they're not in water, they're not in the garden. And I was like, what's that buzzing? Like literally before I came on here, and there's 2 hoverflies and and they're like on the cut flowers that are just laying out drying. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. I love having insects around. It's just
incredible. I love hoverflies. They're fantastic little creatures to watch.
They are, aren't they? And sometimes they come really close to you, and they like really do hover around you. Like they don't seem to dart away. Do you know what I mean? They're just so beautiful.
But they're isn't it? Like, ooh, yeah.
Yeah, totally. And then you get confused with bees and wasps as well, can't they?
Well, some of the hoverflies actually mimic bees and wasps as to basically scare off predators. They can't sting, but they look like they do. But it's called baitism mimicry, and it's quite a lot of wildlife species do it. It's a form of basically scaring off predators without actually hurting anyone. So
clever.
Amazing.
How can we encourage more pollinators into our garden? Like any kind of pollinator friendly gardening tips for listeners?
I mean, really the main thing is with planting is a wide variety of plants. That a lot of people aren't aware that plant shapes and sizes are basically to fit in with the different shapes and sizes of pollinators. So if you can create a vast array of plants, you can create a vast feeding ground for all the various pollinators. Again, things like the wildlife towers, the bee and bug boxes, the little corners of dead piles of wood and leaves, any spaces for pollinators to hide and lay eggs and do all the things that they need to do. I think there's a lot of worry about encouraging too many into the garden because of people getting stung and things like that. And it's something you don't need to worry about, because if they're only going to sting people when they're trying to protect their colonies or their nests. So if they're out on flowers, it's very rare, unless they're being disturbed by people, that they're going to cause an issue. So don't worry about encouraging them in. Just do whatever you can to encourage them in, and creating succession planting throughout the year, so they've got feed throughout. We have what we call the June gap in beekeeping, where we see a gap in the flow of honey, basically. So they're not bringing feed in because the plants have dried up from spring just before summer plants are opening. So things like lavender that open early, geraniums, things like that can produce food over June, are really, really vital to all pollinators, because if we're seeing a lack of flow in our hives, then the other pollinators are going to be seeing that lack of flow as well.
Right. That's a good point, that time in June, because like you're in garden point in sort of end of May, June, where there's not so many flowers about. You have to be specifically think about what will flower during that time. I have to
say, doing the gardening training as well as the beekeeping training has kind of helped a lot with my gardening clients, because I'm able to, bedding plants are not, that's a don't for the garden really. Bedding plants are a hard one because they're produced in mass, they're sterile, they don't produce any pollen, so they're not any benefit to pollinators and things like that. So I've kind of weaned my clients off gardening with things like that and putting in plants that are more beneficial. It's been quite fun really, having all that freedom with these new gardens to create these wildlife havens. It's quite cool. But there's things like that you need to bear in mind if plants aren't producing pollen, or the double flowers have double flowered flowers and bedding plants, but don't go overboard because they're not feeding pollinators. They're there to look at and not for beneficial use. So it's creating a nice mix that you get to see the plants you want to see, as well as feeding a variety of plants.
It's all about a blend, because you can, if you've got the right garden, you can have plants that are good for you, but also plants that are good for pollinators and you as well. And because some doubles like antirrhinums, they still partly open as well. So it's kind of, some are good and some are not. But but it's really, just the biggest variety possible is always the best. And I attended this amazing talk by Fergus Garrett of Great Dixter yesterday on a convention I've been on. And he was saying that in their gardens, they've got a woodland, and they've obviously got the garden where they have all the plants and cultivated and wild. And it was more diverse and biodiverse, their mixture that they'd made than nature. So sometimes you can give it a helping hand here and there. I learned so much yesterday. I've been boring Ellen with it over countless messages, but
I love it when you message me and say I could cry, because then I know that it must be something really good.
Been a good day.
Also, do you want to know another time? I nearly cried twice this week, actually. The other time was at Hampton Court with an amazing display of orchids that had this gorgeous fragrance of like menthol. It was
so I'm
honestly. Yes, you have to see them. Honestly,
I want to talk to you about Hampton Court floral marquee. I can't discuss it with you.
It's not my fault. She missed the floral marquee because she was faffing about, and she lives so far away.
About? Gosh, you just make stuff up. Seriously. I we're there on Monday and decided that I was going to really enjoy the floral marquee. Later in the afternoon, once I've seen everyone and done everything, and I was just going to immerse myself in plants. And then when I got there, it was closed for judging for 3 hours.
Difficult.
But I have to say, Ellen Mary, when you did arrive, I did say, do you want to look in the floral marquee or come and find the people to podcast? She said, I'll come and find the people to podcast. So
I did.
I'm safe in the knowledge that it wasn't my fault.
That was the professional thing to do. Next time I'm going to be less professional about it.
Anyway, next question, Ellen.
Next question. What's the next question? Oh my goodness. What does the future look like for bees?
I think the future is looking bright. It's an interesting question, really, because we are ever fighting things like pesticides. We had a lovely win this year. So although a lot of our pesticides are banned, farmers can apply for special licenses to spray things like sugar beet, which was needed this year. And for the first time ever, the government refused the special permit. So that was a really big win in our books. I guess the downfall is the ever loss of habitat. Like, that's just constantly battering our pollinators. What we're seeing now, though, is an uprise in urban gardening and things like that, which is really promising. That's proven to be a massive help to our pollinators. It's producing a huge food source for our pollinators. So the more habitat we're losing, I think more people are starting to realise that we need to create more habitat again for our pollinators. So I think that's looking really promising. And in terms of honeybees themselves, we've got some really great breeding programs now where beekeepers are starting to produce resistant bees to some of our most deadliest pests. So I think that's a really promising thing, and that's touched on that artificial insemination again. It's for things like that. We use it for special breeding. It can be overused for breeding bees that we've imported and things like that, which is another thing we kind of don't want to do if we can help it, because again, for the future of the bees, the more things we import, the more risk we're increasing of bringing in other pests and diseases that we haven't got here in the UK yet. So it's just getting the balance right, that we can move forward in a way that we're helping all the pollinators without over farming on the bees, without starving our other pollinators, and making sure that there's enough habitat available everywhere for them to kind of continue growing, really. But I think
I'll show you something. Hold on a minute. Hold on. Carry on, but I just got to get a bit.
she's off to the back bedroom.
Yeah, I think from where we were maybe like 6-7 years ago, things are looking a lot more promising.
Yeah. Okay.
In many aspects, and I think the more aware people become, the better it's really. So yeah, definitely.
What's she got to show us?
I'm going to show you this book.
We're all very nervous.
Have you read the book about in China where they had to all hand pollinate all of the crops because the bees were extinct? I can't remember the name of the book now. Anyway,
I don't know the name of the book.
It's called The Shadow of the Future by Marianne Fursick. It's called Hand Pollination in China. And she went out to China and she recorded like a photo diary, and I've just opened it on a page of literally how they have to hand pollinate in the field because the bees have been wiped out. So how their life is climbing up trees and hand pollinating like the cherries, and this is what life would be like for everybody at the end of the day if there were no pollinators. Because if there were none, in order to survive as a children, we would all throughout our lives had to go and hand pollinate crops to feed the world.
That's interesting, because I have this conversation a lot with my gardening clients who always say to me, I'm growing veg, why aren't they producing vegetables? And I'll say more often than not, it's down to pollination. And I'll show them self-pollination. And once they start doing that, they start seeing more vegetables producing. So then they're realising then that they need to start encouraging more pollinators into the garden, because they're having to go and hand pollinate their
totally
or their courgettes or whatever.
Yeah. Look at these. It's like they're doing it with feather dusters almost. See what I mean?
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, that's what they have to do.
That's an interesting book.
There you go.
So Annie, we're coming to the end. How have you found your first podcast interview?
Oh, it's been great fun. Thank you very much for having
Good.
Yeah.
So tell us where listeners can find out more about you, but also more about the Beekeepers Association. How can people join, or kind of tell us about a few of the different outlets that there are available if you're interested in bees, not necessarily being a beekeeper, because we know that takes a lot of training, but to get involved and learn more about the different types of bee and pollinator and what we can do to assist them.
Okay, so that's the kind of grounds that I cover. I basically do experiences for people who aren't necessarily wanting to do beekeeping but want to learn more about bees or about pollinators, and you can come down and put a suit on and see what the bees are up to in the hive and things like that. If you go to somewhere like the British Beekeepers Association, who are fantastic, that's going to be more hands-on training, teaching you how to become a beekeeper. So those are the kind of differences, really. I will train and mentor up-and-coming beekeepers as well, if that's what's needed, sort of thing. And it depends on your area. There's a lot of beekeepers around that will do this sort of thing that aren't attached to the Beekeepers Association. It kind of depends what route you want to go down. There's mentor programs, there's big training programs where you can go and do 2 years of training with a group of people. There's all sorts that you can do, really. In terms of learning more about pollinators and things like that, there's lots of talks around. I do a lot of talks with gardening clubs and things like that, so it might be worth having a look around your local clubs and seeing who's talking or what speakers are available and things like that. Or if you're a member of a club, look for beekeepers and educators in pollinators and things like that who do talks for your clubs, because we're all up for it. I mean, I go and do talks for schools and things like that as well. So
yeah, amazing.
There's lots around, really, for lots of people in many areas, whether you want to be a beekeeper or just want to learn more about the subject. So.
And of course, social media, which is a brilliant platform for spreading the message and for us all to meet each other. It's amazing. My 12-year-old self could never imagine the connectivity we have now across horticulture, agriculture, all of this. It's amazing.
It's absolutely incredible. And I think it's nice how it's bringing everyone together. A lot of the time people say there's always this big fight between beekeepers and farmers because they want to spray crops and we want to keep bees and don't get on. And actually what social media has done is brought us together, and we're working together.
It's humanized you, I guess, as people.
That's it. And we're getting on to a point now where farmers will spray their crops in the evening once the bees have stopped being out for the day. There's all different things that are happening that are kind of respecting each other's world. And I believe a lot of that has come from social media. So it's
interesting.
Really cool. Yeah.
Okay, well, to finish off, tell us where they can find you on social media.
So I am Annie Bees Beekeeping. That's BEA because that's my middle name.
It was fate. It was always fate then.
Yeah, it was fate. Well, as a child, my nickname was Bumble. So my parents and my family still call me Bumble. It's just one of those things. That's
you are literally a bee.
I'm actually a bee. Yeah, I'm actually a bee. So yeah, Annie Bees.
Sorry, that was. Yeah, to Annie Bees Beekeeping.
Across all socials, and our website is www.anniebeesbeekeeping.com. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today. It's been really, really enlightening.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much.
Oh my gosh, guys, Ellen and I are doing separate podcasts this week because we've both been mega busy, and even myself, I nearly didn't do this gossip because I decided it would be good to have a spring clean of my apartment here in London. And I'm in the biggest mess you can imagine. I decided to do every part of the apartment at the same time, and it looks like utter carnage right now. So you guys are very lucky that you're not here to see it. So anyway, I was going to give you a short report of what I've been up to very recently because I've had a bit of a momentous week. I've been hosting an industry event. I've been adulting. I've been hosting the HTA annual conference, and I think I did quite well at being a grown-up, even though a friend of mine said I looked like a corporate Barbie, which I took as a compliment, actually. That was quite a sweet thing to say. I think it went very well. There was some very interesting conversations throughout the day, excellent peak conversation, very, very honest information as well, even around careers and what we need to do to inspire more people to join our wonderful industry. So it was a really, really enjoyable day. Where else have I been? It's all been a blur. This week I've got a very busy week. I'm going to Exbury, going to Provender. They've got an open day. Also going to do some filming, bulb planting. So yeah, October used to be quite a bit. It seems that's just as busy as any other month at the moment. So it's definitely getting to autumn now, though. I was at Kew yesterday. The autumn colours are just creeping in, which is very nice to see. Beautiful autumn crocus there as well. And I'm kind of knee deep in this rearrangement. And I must confess, dear reader, listener, that my plants were quite dry, especially the big ones. And I think I need to do a bit of a compost refreshing on the top of the containers as well. So there you go. Even the experts kind of get it wrong quite often, actually, if I'm honest. What else was I going to tell you? My Substack. I'm relaunching my Substack over the next few days. It's called Grow This, Not That, and it's going to be very exciting. So I hope you'll subscribe and see what it's all about, and maybe even upgrade your subscription so you can get that intel on brand new plants and trend developments. So anyway, thank you guys for joining me very much, and I will see you all very soon.
Hi everyone, Ellen Mary here. I feel completely out of sorts doing a gossip without my partner in plants, Michael Perry. And also just putting it out there that I'm moving out of my house at the moment and it's pandemonium. So I'm sitting outside in a car. So every now and again you will hear a car probably driving past. Sorry about that. But if it makes you feel any better, like it is me, there's loads of trees around me and it's very beautiful. So anyway, an update on things that have been going on. Obviously, Michael and I have just had such a busy schedule over this last week or so. We have not been able to get a time where we could chat together, but hopefully we'll be back to normal again very, very soon. In the next week or two, we'll be back here gossiping. In the meantime, it's October. It's lovely weather where I am in Norfolk, and I've been doing loads of stuff down on the allotment to prepare it for autumn and winter. So mulching mainly, great big piles of mulch delivered to the allotment, and that's being spread all over the beds. But I have to say, the stars of the allotment right now are the cut flowers. So the dahlias are looking extraordinary right now. They have had a really long flowering season this year. And I always say to anyone, if you live somewhere that's not exceptionally cold for long periods of time over winter, then leave them in and cut them back, leave them in and give them a very heavy mulch. And that's what I do every year. And then in spring, when things have warmed up, I remove a little bit of mulch around each dahlia and let it grow, and they spring into action so quickly and they just seem to have grown so strong. And I've been doing this for 15 years or more and I've never lifted them. But at the moment I've got Bohemian Spartacus, Myrtle's Folly, Happet Blue Eyes, Kelvin Floodlight. I've got Cafe au lait, which I've got to be honest with you is not my favourite of all the dahlias. Penhill Watermelon, Wine-Eyed Jill, Wendy's Baby. I can't remember anymore now, but there's loads and it's looking amazing. And the other side of the cut flower patch is zinnias, which have grown so tall, maybe 4 foot, and they are full of bees. Loads of straw flowers, which I've now harvested already. The sunflowers have gone over, but one cut flower patch that's looking extraordinary is the ageratum. It's purplish, lilac, white, pinkish and burgundy, so different colours, and it's like little bits of froth on the end of the stem, and everybody who sees them, either in photographs or comes to the allotment, asks what they are, and they are amazing. So they are flowering right now. They look really cute in the vase as well. I actually sowed those last year in trays. Grew them as cut flowers last year, and I left them over winter, so they went to seed, and all of them that are growing right now are self-seeded, and they are very, very happy. So that's really cool. So yeah, right now the allotment's kind of going to bed because I go back to the US in a couple of weeks for winter time, so I do clear up the allotment perhaps a little earlier than I would like. I leave plenty of winter interest, so loads of plants get left just to do their thing for insects and wildlife. But the cultivated beds, really for the vegetables, like the annual veg, that all gets mulched. I'm busy doing that at the moment. I'm busy moving house. And also, today I've been up at the skate retreat. If you haven't heard of the skate retreat, look it up on Instagram. It's run by Danny. Her Instagram tag is Danny in the Wild, I think. It was plot_81, I think, but it's Danny in the Wild. She is amazing. She runs a skate retreat where you can go skateboarding in the woods in a really safe, inclusive environment. Loads of nature activities, amazing food. I cannot tell you, it's so exceptional. Just really lovely place to be. So I've been up there running, sorry about the motorbike that just went by. I've been up there running some forest bathing sessions and doing some Reiki in the woods, and it's extremely magical, and I absolutely love it. But now my exhausted self is heading home to finish packing boxes. I think it will be a takeaway this evening. I really hope that you've enjoyed listening to Annie's bees, because isn't she amazing? She's so fabulous, and we know how important it is to save the bees. So growing lots and lots of flowers for next year for bees. I definitely recommend it this time, like after you've done all of the hard work and the allotment and you've got some time over winter, is really planning out what you're going to grow to help insects next year. So not just bees, but also butterflies and lacewings and ladybirds and loads of different insects. Every single insect counts. So anyway, there you go. I'm going to remove myself from the car. And thank you for listening to the Plant-Based Podcast, as always. And Michael and I will be back with our usual gossip very soon. Introducing a LAVA-LITE No Gnats, the red one. Get rid of your fungus gnat infestation with No Gnats. No Gnats offers a simple 100% natural solution to the eradication of these annoying flies on your houseplants and office plants. It creates a barrier between the soil and the air. No Gnats inhibits the ability to lay eggs in the soil and for the fungus gnat larvae to escape, for total fungus gnat control. Look out for it online and in your local gardening stores. Find out more at lava-lite.co.uk.
The music for the Plant-Based Podcast is part of the song Grow by Mikey James, and our editor is Gareth Patch of Semi Echo.